So I spent 12 years in Boston, and then now exactly 12 years at Columbia University, working basically in regenerative medicine. And then more recently, in response to some of the emerging clinical needs, we started to be very invested into precision medicine, into developing new drugs, into building organs on a chip systems with human tissues that can help us de-risk the drug development. So here at Columbia, I'm closely linked to the departments of biomedical engineering and Department of Medicine. We are on the medical campus. I run a lab with about 35 super talented people that range from undergraduate students all the way up to PhDs, MD PhDs, postdocs, a couple of people in the lab are already assistant professors in the clinical center. And we are really all invested into developing new medical technologies and using these technologies to advance science and also to advance medicine. So one ultimate goal of all of us who are working in this field is really to bring some of these technologies to the patients, to the real use. And this actually made us launch these 3 companies that we launched in the last 3.5 years. Epibone, which is in the regenerative medicine space, Tara Biosystems, which is in organs on a chip space, and then we have Matritech, now East River, interestingly, which is a biomaterials company. So just to add one more sentence, what is really the most exciting component of this work is some kind of continuity when you have students, postdocs in the lab, we all work together on something, so we publish our science, we file our patents, and then the same people actually moved to some of these companies. So there is this continuity which also generates a feeling of ownership. This is like the work that you have done scientifically. You are a co-inventor on a patent. You are a co-founder of the company. And I think this is a very important dimension of all our work. So we don't advertise positions and hire people only. We are really trying to make room for people who are interested to move from the lab. And also some of our executives are actually a result of this. Like over the years, you talk to people, let's do something together, let's do something together. So we have quite a few let's do something together as our COOs, CEOs. And this experience and history of working with people together really makes things very different than when we are not operating like as a company. I mean, it's somehow different just because of this factor that actually people carry over this previous history of research and partnership and co-inventorship.
Thanks. Because she's too modest to say so herself. Also, please join me in congratulating Gordana. She was just last night, and it was President Bollinger announced that Gordana was made a university professor, the highest ranked professor you can be at Columbia. So. Ewan.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today, Oren. I'm Ewan Robertson. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer and Special Advisor to the CEO at the Economic Development Corporation. So just a little bit on EDC. As the name might suggest, we're the city's economic development arm. We're actually a little bit unusual in that we're not a city government agency. We function as a not-for-profit, and we're independent of the city's budget. We have 3 main lines of business. We're a real estate developer and have partnered with a number of people, including Alexandria, over the years to develop the right type of space for companies to grow, start and grow in the city. We also get involved in a number of large capital construction projects. So we manage about $7 billion of the city's capital money to build out infrastructure and different types of facilities here. And then the third leg of the stool in terms of what we do is really all about partnerships and programs that focus on key sectors of the city's economy. So those are either sectors that are already large employers here, and we partner with leaders in those industries to figure out how we're competitively positioned, what the barriers to growth are, and how to maintain and potentially further grow those industries. And then also looking at where the new opportunities are, where are our less developed and more nascent sectors that by partnering with industry we can help to nurture and grow those. And obviously, one of the reasons that I'm here today is to talk about life sciences, which the city believes is a sector that has a lot of growth potential over the coming decade and beyond. A little bit about my own career. I spent 14 years of my professional life in London before I moved to New York. Initially, I did an internet startup back in the mid-90s through 2001, through the boom, and then that bust. I then went to work for a large corporate called British Energy, which runs a lot of the nuclear power stations in the UK, doing technology strategy for them. Then did my first government job working in healthcare in the UK for the national government, putting in place some change management for the healthcare system there. Moved to New York in 2008, and I actually started my first job at EDC. This is my second tour in city government, but worked for 5 years under the Bloomberg administration. My first job at EDC was to run the strategy team. And my first day on the job was September 15th, 2008, which was the morning the markets opened when Lehman went bust. And so, I was like the new strategy guy when the world was melting down. And I clearly remember going over to City Hall and sitting there with some very senior administration officials and people looking at me and saying, okay, new guy, like, what are we going to do? What have you got? And yeah, and so a lot of our focus and my professional focus over the subsequent time period has been on innovation and entrepreneurship, and in particular partnership with universities. I was deeply involved in something called Applied Sciences NYC, which led to a number of joint venture projects with universities, including the new Cornell Tech campus on Roosevelt Island. I guess in closing, some advice for what it's worth from my career. I think be curious, be open to new and different opportunities, and try and work with people who are much smarter than you, because you'll always learn something, and that then leads to the next opportunity.
Great. Thanks. So I thought I might just set the stage. For those of us on the panel, most of us have lived through the last 10 or so years in New York City, but some of you may be newer to the town. So I thought I might just set the stage for where this was back at the time period that Ewan was first referring to. So I actually found out about this field I was a former consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. And when I was at BCG, we did a project for the Bloomberg administration back in 2004, which had a very bold vision at the time, the Bloomberg administration, of saying, we suffered through the first dot-com bust. Things were still fairly fallow. And at that time, New York had 1/3 of the venture capital that Massachusetts did, and 1/13 the VC funding that California received every year. And yet the vision was, how do we turn that around into a startup capital? How do we make New York City build on its strengths and become a startup capital in all fields? So our focus was on bioscience, which is why it's amazing to see how far we've come. In the meantime, as many of you obviously know, New York has become a huge startup town, primarily in tech so far, but also in media, fashion, food. There's startups everywhere. There's 1,000 tech companies by the city's count. Graduate students there's fierce competition for graduate students with technical backgrounds. There's over 100 incubators and co-working spaces, lots of meetups and events. That Google and Twitter and other big tech firms have moved here. We've had successful exits from companies like Shutterstock, Tumblr, MakerBot, Huffington Post, a bunch of other firms. So the tech side has been booming, which is great. And I think what we're starting to see is a real momentum building on the biotech side as well. So Alexandria is full, is that right at this point?
Yeah, we're about 99.5% full.
Okay, so there's 0.5% left if you want to rush and try and put in an application, but aside from that, Alexandria is for all intents full. Harlem Biospace is doing great right down the hill by Professor Sam Sia, who opened that. We've got J-Labs, Johnson & Johnson's Innovation Center, opening in town, sharing space with the New York Genome Center. Cambridge Biolabs is coming to town as well to open a facility. So there's finally real estate that has been created in town to host these companies. We've seen venture firms from outside New York plant flags here in New York. So Arch, Flagship, Versant, Accelerator have all started operations in town. And the local shops like Deerfield and Lux have started to invest in local New York City companies. So it's amazing, actually, just in the last year, from Columbia alone, we've seen Kallyope open in Alexandria, Kyras from Brent Stockwell's lab, Applied Therapeutics from Don Landry, and actually that one was invested in by Alexandria and is also hosted in Alexandria, with a combined $50 million in Series A funding from those companies alone, from Lux, Versant, and Alexandria, all in Manhattan. And then we've just sitting on the panel, Gordana mentioned her 3 tissue engineering startups that are all based here in the city as well. So it's really an amazing time. Go back just slightly to December, and we heard announcements from the mayor of $500 million more over the next 10 years to encourage early stage life sciences here in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And in interesting timing, the governor also announced $650 million of funding for exactly the same purpose across the New York state. So that's $1.1 some odd billion in funding for this field. It's an incredible journey so far, and I can't wait to hear your views on what happens in the road ahead.